So this is video number 2 of the day. So if you didn't get a notification for my other video after this, please do go and check out the other video. We're going to be talking about Sean Daugherty here again. I'm going to be doing videos on Sean every day for the next few days, just to get you up to date on this series of, how can I say, these are written by Sean's mum, and they give you an insight into the case, so you guys can hear directly from the family the rendition of what has gone on, what has happened. If you haven't seen anything else yet, this is the first time you've heard about this case, please do check my other videos on the case. We need to get this case out there and seen. Now I'm going to read you this now. So Maria, Sean's older sister, had been at her tennis match after school. She was rushing home because her boyfriend AJ and his mother were picking her up to go to his lacrosse game. When she got home, the front door was locked. She rang the bell and knocked, and no one answered. Where was Sean? He was supposed to be home. She called her mother, Ramona, who told her to call Sean and advised that he was probably gaming upstairs. Maria was frustrated as she was in a rush. Just keep that in mind. I'm not saying too much at the moment. I'm going to go through all of these posts over the next few days, and then we're going to go back over some important things. But at this stage, all we can know is that Maria, the older sister, she was in a rush. She was frustrated about being sort of made late, potentially. She called Sean twice and texted 3 times at 4:50 p.m, but there was no response. She decided to run back around the house to try and enter through the back door, and that's when she saw him. She froze at that moment, entering a state of shock as she tried to process what she was seeing. A person was hanging from the swing set, unnaturally, with a bag over their head. She looked around trying to figure out if she could get into the house before this stranger got her, but she realised the figure was not moving, nor was it facing her. Utterly confused, she scanned the yard to make sure she wasn't alone, and locked eyes with a landscaper mowing the neighbour's yard, who was also very puzzled and just standing there. Suddenly, confident since she wasn't alone, she came within a 15-foot radius and called out hello, but there was no response. Thoughts chaotically ran through her mind as she tried to process what she was seeing. The hands and legs looked so familiar. It was Sean. Hysterically, she ran up to her brother and confirmed it was him by looking closely at his hands, which were both bound to his waist by a belt and discoloured from lack of circulation. Screaming, she lifted her brother with one arm in hopes of releasing the pressure from his head and called 911. This was at 4:54 p.m. With her other hand, she removed him from his hanging position by simply lifting the shoelace-type string over his head with 3 fingers, brought him down to the ground, and performed CPR for 6 minutes with the assistance of the 911 dispatcher until the EMTs took over. Sean was dressed in men's clothing, his arms so tightly bound to his waist, the EMTs made note of how difficult it had been to remove it. They had to unbuckle and move it so that they could administer shocks with the AED. He had a bag over his head and his glasses were broken and found in the vicinity. His eyesight was so poor he couldn't see without his glasses. How could this clumsy 12-year-old suspend himself in such an awkward position with a bag on his head while his hands were belted so tightly to his waist without being able to see? He was suspended by his chin, not his neck. At this point he could have stood up and saved himself, but he did not. His feet were actually dragging on the ground, and his bent knees were mere inches from the ground as well. So that just shows you how high or how low he was. In fact, normal hanging injuries weren't present. It looked like he'd been killed somewhere else and propped up ornamentally outside, displayed in men's clothing and suspended like a doll. His knees were so close to the ground that you could see the bottom of his feet, and they were clean. How could he have perfectly clean feet if he had walked barefoot from the house to the swing set through their swampy spring yard? It was April and the whole yard was mud and dust. I also would question that if he was suspended from the swing set, there would naturally be some struggling. Even with his hands bound, there would naturally be struggling. And if he was barefoot, there would be signs of that struggle on his feet. So if his feet genuinely were clean, that again is a massive red flag here, bearing in mind that they're saying that this was self-inflicted. Ramona arrived home from the appointment to find her house swarming with emergency medical personnel. She jumped out of her SUV and ran towards the commotion. She saw them working on Sean, and in that instant the life she had lived ceased to exist. As Sean's body jumped through the air with each shock from the AED, she knew they were too late. Through heroic efforts from Maria, they were able to get a heartbeat, but there wasn't enough electricity to sustain it. They'll find out later that Sean had actually been gone for some time, and there was no chance he could have ever been revived. A belt that completely immobilized his arms and hands, a bag over his head, broken glasses, suspended by the chin, clean feet dragging with knees almost touching the ground, a string so thin and loose it didn't even need to be cut, men's clothing, and Sean was gone.